done. So, good afternoon, everyone. I think we might start now. If you think it's fine, I will let people in while you're speaking. And well, good afternoon, everyone. And I'm Gail from Focus, and I'm pleased to see you all here today, even though the sun is shining outside. So we are at Focus. We are a network of international people, and we are here to support you throughout your settling in period. So we offer all kinds of services. We share our resources, and we also organize events, webinars, and we have a career development program for spouses who want to go back to work. So you are more than welcome to actually contact us if you need more details. But for the moment, I leave the floor to Victoria, who's been working with us for quite a while now and who's been helping a lot of people with the English language, with the cultural trainings as well. So Victoria, thank you so much for being here today and for sharing your expertise. So Victoria, it's your turn. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gail, and hello everybody, welcome, good afternoon. So lovely to see such a lovely group here back at Focus virtually. I recognise one or two faces, so nice to see you again beyond the Focus team. And I'm really excited to be back here at Focus to share this topic all about small talk in English, being confident in small talk for your networking. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen. But just to let you know, this is quite an informal session, although I've got a number of different ideas, tips, strategies to share with you today. We're not too big a group, so feel free to just unmute yourself. If you have a question, if there's something you want to ask, please feel free to just jump in. Or if you prefer, you can just put in the chat your question and I'll come to that and make sure I answer all your questions before the end. So let me start by sharing my screen. So here we go. And then I'm just going to make sure I can see. There we go as well. Fantastic. So why this particular topic? Well, this is quite an interesting one. I mean, clearly, networking is a really important skill. And as you move to the UK, whether you've been here for 1 week or maybe even several years, networking continues to be a really important part of whether you're looking for a new job, whether you're building your network for your career and ongoing job promotion or new roles, or whether you're actually building a business here in the UK. And one of the very interesting things that I find when I work with my international clients is that small talk is an area which is often very, very challenging when English is your second or third or fourth language, because actually it is all about being quite informal. It is all about having quite a relaxed conversation, but of course there usually is quite high value to that conversation. It is all about connecting, building the rapport, potentially even sort of looking for new connections and introductions. So there is high value to it, but it is also something therefore we need to develop and think about. So I'm going to share with you today these tips and strategies. Please do stay until the end because I've got a really special gift I have for the Focus group here today. So do try and stay if you can for the whole session. So a little bit about what we'll be covering. So to start with, we'll talk about strategies to get going with a small talk. So perhaps you're somebody who feels a little bit uncomfortable, whether that is happening online or increasingly I've noticed in particular the last few days that more and more events are going face to face as well. So we all have to adjust a little bit to this idea of kind of face to face networking again and making small talk confidently. So we'll talk about those strategies to start. I'll also talk about smoothly joining a group. So sometimes this can be a bit difficult. You know, you walk into a room or you're in an online space and the groups have already started talking with each other. So how do you get involved in the conversation naturally and appropriately? We'll talk about what to talk about, but also what not to talk about as well. So I think there probably are some universal themes here, but I'm actually, because we're talking about it, particularly from the idea of English perhaps being your second or third language, we'll talk specifically about easy ways to build up the conversation and how can you do that. And then we'll get into talking about balancing general talk with your agenda. Now, if you are networking with a particular purpose in mind, so for example, you are looking for introductions to certain types of organizations or recruiters, or you're looking for a job, then absolutely you have an agenda. So when is the right moment to get round to, this is what I want, and I can see you're the right person to help me here. And we'll talk about the appropriate way to kind of do that. And then finally, I'll talk about ending the conversation well. Clearly, you want to leave a really good last impression. But equally, there are sometimes those conversations that are difficult or don't go as well as you'd like. So I will also talk about how you can exit the conversation if you find yourself in a situation where it's not really kind of working out. So that's a little bit about what we'll cover. A little bit about me. I know that I've met some of you before, but just to introduce what I do and why. So I'm an English communication and culture coach. I work with international professionals, both as private clients and also corporate teams. And I'm regularly writing and speaking about these topics of English communication, British life, British culture. And it's kind of my area of expertise. It's what I love talking about. This is my business. My business is called Perfect Cuppa English. And if you don't know already, a cuppa is a cup of tea in British English. And this is a business that actually I've been doing for almost 7 years now. But this is my second career. So my background is I started life in the corporate world in brand marketing. I work for some very large American and British companies. And that's where I really identified this potential gap, the English communication gap. So I could see there were lots of very highly skilled, highly experienced professionals who operated in English every single day, but actually needed those kind of nuances and understanding to really understand culturally what was going on or how to express themselves well in the moment. And as you can probably hear, I'm British and a Londoner. So I'm currently standing in northwest London, just near to Hampstead. So that's a bit about me. So the first question I have for you is, what is small talk? Now, I know that probably sounds like a really obvious question, like, or obvious answer perhaps to that question. But actually, it's quite interesting when you ask this question, as I have done to my clients, about what is the role of small talk? What is it actually there for? And some of the answers that I've had back are quite interesting, from very positive to perhaps a little bit negative. So I've had people talk about, it's conversation about unimportant things. It's really, trivial. It's not an important part of the discussion. For others, it's more positive. It's light, informal conversation. Others see it as painful, even. Like, for some people, this is actually quite an awkward part of the conversation. And for others, they just see it as a waste of time, potentially because culturally, where they're from, actually, it just doesn't have that same role. It's not really needed in the conversation. But I wanted to offer to you today a particular definition of what small talk is about. And for me, small talk is an important conversation ritual. And I think this is really nice because it's really about that ritual. It's a pattern which is expected within British culture. So it's quite important to make sure you're engaging in it in the right way. And it's relevant whether you've just met somebody or known somebody a long time. So it isn't just about, meeting people the first time. So you can get to know them personally and you can connect. Now, I've put that in mega bold because for me, this is kind of the critical point. It isn't just empty chat or empty conversation. What we're doing here is we're connecting on a very human level, and that is important. The other thing to say here is that in English, the verb we use with small talk is to make. We don't do small talk, we make it. This means that we have to create it. We have to approach it from the point of view that we're creating something between us rather than just acting it out. The final thought, which I'll leave you in terms of small talk definition, is something very, very interesting I read, which was that there was a particular Stanford research report that was done, which followed how successful their MBAs were when they went off in their careers. And they were looking at particularly, how they performed from a promotional point of view and also from a salary point of view. And then they identified their sort of top performing cohorts and said, okay, what connects these people? What are the characteristics of these people that have made them super, super successful? And that report said the one connective idea was that they were able to easily talk to anybody. So this is what small talk is about. It is not only about a nice human connection, it can have very tangible benefits for your career, promotion opportunities, as well as pay. So how to approach people. Now, I just want to start with some general principles, both thinking about face-to-face and virtual. So the first thing is, again, this may sound a bit obvious, but I like to go back to basic principles, which is that, we need to have open signals. We need to think about our body language. So we need to be approaching, it's always great if you can approach another individual, if you're in a physical space. Virtually, it's obviously a little bit easier because you're normally put into breakout rooms to have kind of discussions. But the same idea is true, which is, keep your body language quite open, catch people's eye, smile. If you're in a physical space, walk over and connect. So that is really important. That's part of, just opening up the conversation. And then this quote, which I think is really interesting, from Stephen Covey, which says, seek first to understand, then to be understood. And I love this quote because thinking about small talk kind of particularly, I think this is where this idea connects. So the goal is connection. We need to be genuinely interested in the other person first. So start with the curiosity. Find out what you have in common, even if it's not obvious to start with. Find out what makes the other person tick, and you may find that sort of common ground together. So that is a really good approach to the small talk. When you're online, again, I think some of us have obviously been very used to networking online for a while now, but I just wanted to again remind us of some key principles. It's actually much better if you can to use a laptop or a PC, just because if you're connecting via tablet or mobile, often you can't really see people properly, particularly if it's a large group. And often, there's it's not as a steady image. You don't appear such a strong image. So I would absolutely encourage you to if you're kind of going to a serious networking event, use your laptop or PC. I'd also say connect via Ethernet if that's possible, rather than Wi-Fi. There's nothing worse than constantly dropping in or out of a meeting, or finding that people can't really hear you because you've got interference on your Wi-Fi. Another top tip, I think this is quite interesting. You might notice that I've got my full name and job title. I haven't put my company, I've chosen to put my job title. If you're going to a professional networking event, particularly if you're using it for a purpose such as job searching or career development, I would absolutely look to change your name. So you can rename yourself and put further details about your job area or your company. And I think that is a really good approach, because even if people sort of see your face, they may forget what your name is, but if your name is there the whole time, then it's visible. People are more likely to remember your name. Look at the camera. Now this, I know sometimes people really don't like this. They get distracted by other people's images on the screen. They sometimes feel like it feels quite weird to look straight at the camera. But if you're online, it really helps with the connection. It feels like you're in a proper conversation if you're constantly looking at the camera. Now, I mean, of course, it's okay, as I'm doing now, to look away occasionally and or to look at your notes if you've got any notes, but try to keep your attention sort of 80% of the time looking at the camera. And then my final tip here is to be fully present. I know it is really tempting if you are in a meeting, in a networking meeting, to either potentially switch camera off and start doing your own thing, or to get distracted, pick up your phone and start, or emails or social media or whatever it might be. But I really would say, please don't, try and avoid doing this. It's really obvious in an online meeting when people are doing this. And if your objective is networking and making a small talk, then actually this is not really going to help with the connection. The next thing is about the Dr. Pepper moment. I don't know if you remember the Dr. Pepper advert, about, I don't know when it was, maybe 20 years ago, but they had an advert which said, what's the worst that can happen? So if you are somebody who does not feel very confident in small talk, also in social English, and feel very uncomfortable with this idea of the conversation, then just think about what's the worst that is going to happen as a result. I think usually our fears are far worse than kind of reality. I think the worst that can really happen is you end up having a conversation with somebody where perhaps you don't really have that much in common or that much connection, but that's fine. You've only kind of wasted maybe 5 minutes of your time. I think the positive outcomes are far, far better. So clearly you may be able to be introduced to exactly the right person you're trying to meet. You may be able to find the job you've been looking for. You may be able to, if you have a business, you may be able to meet somebody who can help you. So that's the thing to focus on. And then finally, enjoy. Remember, this is just conversation. So be authentically you. Don't feel like you have to be in a certain way or give a certain impression, because it won't come across naturally. So you just want to be authentically who you are. Okay, so strategies to open conversation. Here are some ideas about if you find small talk really not very comfortable, where do you start? Where can you kind of get going? So my thoughts initially are that you could start by asking some open-ended question about the event. So think about the key question words: who, what, how, why, where, and when. And here are some examples of the types of questions that you can ask, and these are applicable to online as much as face-to-face. In addition, I would say for face-to-face, you could even ask where questions, such as have you been to this venue before? Or this is a great venue, I really like this about it, what do you think? So you could include this if you're in face-to-face kind of networking. Also try something that connects to the speaker or to the event or event organizer. So you could, if you are at an event where there are a number of speakers, you could get some conversation going about this or what they're talking about. You could talk about similar events or other events that this particular organizer has put together. So these are quite easy places to start, because they are absolutely what you do have in common, which is the event itself. So that's kind of a particularly good strategy I would suggest for opening. When it comes to joining a group, now this is one where I know people feel kind of perhaps more awkward about, because particularly to get back to that face-to-face networking, that can feel a little bit sort of difficult if somebody's already deep in conversation, making sure that you can kind of get into that conversation and have the chat. Okay, so here are my tips for doing it and making it feel more comfortable for you. So the first thing is to physically move into the space. Be confident about this. I don't think there really is nothing worse than feeling like you're kind of half trying to get into the conversation and nobody's really sure, are you just getting yourself another glass of water, or are you kind of joining this group to have the chat? So I think it works if you can catch somebody's eye in the group. So by this I mean look across and see if you can connect eyes with somebody and smile. Usually this means that other person will reflect their body language, they'll smile back, the rest of the group will turn around and they'll make space for you. So that is kind of the natural way of how it works. You can also say something like, mind if I join you? And then I would start by pausing and actively listening, because you want to understand what is being said, what are they talking about in this particular conversation. I would absolutely build on the current discussion. So you can do this clearly by asking questions, offering a view on the topic, but be careful not to suddenly change topics, because obviously this is a group that's established in conversation. So you kind of want to build on what's already kind of there. If other people join the group, then invite people into the conversation. So, tell them what you were just discussing, and do make sure that you're thinking about inclusive topics. So when it comes to small talk, we want to really make sure that we're talking about topics that include everybody. Now, I'm going to sort of throw out a question here. We'll talk more about topics later, but I have a number of topics which I'm always intrigued to see what the group think about. So, if I was in small talk and I was talking about football, do we feel like this is an inclusive topic, or is this excluding people? So feel free to unmute and let me know what you think.
I think it's, hey, Victoria, good to see you again. This is
Hi, Kawe, how you doing?
Hey, I'm just having my lunch, so you see my...
Oh, no problems at all. Absolutely fine.
So football, I think it's an interesting topic. It looks like most English people, they know football. So I would think that it's an inclusive topic.
Okay.
But they are, I know there are minorities out there who may not understand football at all. But to me, I think it's an inclusive topic.
Thank you for sharing that. So thank you so much, Kawe. It's really, really good to get your perspective on this. Are there any other views or perspectives on football as a topic for small talk?
I think it's inclusive topic as well, because most people like to speak about football. So it will be inclusive, I guess.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Layla, for sharing that as well.
No problem.
I think football is a really, really interesting one. I think you have to, I always let other people bring up football, because I think the reality is that you're right, both of you, that there is a very large kind of majority who do like football, but there are definitely people who don't. So I think with sport, you have to feel a little bit and test it out. Does that person respond to the football chat, or don't they? I think the only thing that I would say, just be really careful with, is that I have been in groups before where half the group start talking about football and the other half are smiling and standing there thinking, I don't really like football, I don't really want to talk about it. So just be aware of that dynamic. And if you notice that, it may be sort of wise to move the conversation on. I'm going to ask you about another topic, which I think is quite interesting. Should we talk about COVID, or shouldn't we, in small talk? What are people's views on this?
Yeah, hello.
Hi, Tamar.
I would think COVID is the topic like it was Brexit before.
Yes,
You'll never know. You have to talk about it, but you'll never know the reactions of the people.
That's a really good perspective, Tamar. Yes, I think you're right. I think there are sort of topics which are very divisive. We have to be a bit careful of. I agree Brexit was one of those. And, COVID is a bit of a tricky one, I would say. I think the only angle I would suggest that you take if you, decide you want to talk about COVID is the positive one. So this is today, 22nd of September. Things are looking relatively positive in the UK today. I would say, okay, well, let's talk about, if you want to, going back to normal. Are you going back to the office at the moment? How often are you there? Is it nice to see your colleagues again? So this kind of angle on COVID is okay. I would avoid too much negative talk about COVID, and certainly avoid talking about anything to do with vaccinations or anything about like COVID passports, which is very, very divisive topics. So, okay, thank you for your contributions there. It's good to get some thoughts as well from you. So finally, body language. I am big on body language. With groups, it is important to maintain the eye contact. Don't be tempted to start looking at your phone or your watch. These are obviously very closed signals to say you don't want to continue the small talk. nodding your head occasionally to show the interest. British people are quite good at this sometimes, even if they aren't interested. But you know, these kind of body language signals are quite important within a British small talk context.
Victoria, we've lost the sound. I can't hear you.
Okay, hold on, let me stop sharing.
No,
Nobody
yeah,
can hear me.
it's back on, yes.
Is it back on now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that, everybody. Let me go back then. Thank you for letting me know. So let me just go back here. Okay, just double checking everybody can hear me. Give me a thumbs up. Okay, great. So the final point for me is standing, you want to kind of stand kind of relatively in a close group, but people are very aware of personal space at the moment. So just be aware of that. You may want to give more space than we would naturally have done in the past, just because people have that, some people have some feeling about kind of personal space at this time as they're getting used to meeting people face to face. So that's how you get about joining a group. So let's now talk about what to talk about, the topics in more detail. So before the event, some easy research that you can do. You can do some research about who's attending, if you've got a list of participants. Certainly, you can do some research on the speaker, or the speakers. And again, that's a really nice topic to connect you. You definitely should think about what your questions or views are on the event themes, and this is a great way to start the small talk. And then finally, my tip is to look at the news on the day and see if there's anything that is current that connects to the event theme, because actually that's a nice build that you can talk about. What should we avoid talking about? Well, we talked about some of the topics already, but here's other ones which I think are worth avoiding within a British small talk context. Certainly detailed political arguments. People may refer to politics at a very top line level, but people don't really like talking about it. They'll probably move the conversation on fairly quickly. Certainly physical appearance. The only exception that I've noticed is woman to woman. So if you know somebody, you can sometimes say, oh, I love your haircut, or I love the color of your shoes, or something like this. But just be a bit cautious with this one. And then certainly anything to do with religion or to do with age. That's something which people don't really want to talk about. And now what I want to share with you was my framework. So this is hopefully something really useful. I use this with my clients to help them build up confidence around English small talk. So helping them to really think about how they build up the phrases and how do they actually build up the conversation. So the way this works is it's a framework to kind of pick some phrases. So you start with an opener. Now that might be an introduction to a topic, or it might be transitioning from one topic to another. You need to say, you're making a remark, so you say something like, I hear, or I understand, or I believe. At this point, you need a subject, so you need to pick something to talk about, either at a sort of more closer level, so it could be about, company or the mutual connection that you have, or it could really be at a macro level, like the sector or the market. You need a verb, so something about you're commenting on something that's happened or maybe will happen in the future. And then you can kind of pick out your topic ideas. And the kinds of topics that I suggest, I have put weather on there. For those of you who kind of know me or been to my events before, you know that I may talk about the weather talk. But weather talk is only a brief kind of conversation normally. We make a couple of remarks about today is a lovely sunny day, or whatever the kind of remark might be. But it's best to move off that and then get into some other topics. Clearly, anything to do with work is a great topic. We've already mentioned about the venue or the event itself. And then you can kind of go into other macro trends. But actually, if you find the conversation is flowing nicely and you are getting to know each other well, then you can move into some of these more personal topics. and find your connections and common ground through whether it's a love of food or travel, or at this time of year, although it's already, you know, mid-September, you can still talk about the summer holidays. You can talk about where people perhaps have they been traveling already. So these are all kind of safe topics. And I hope this kind of framework is useful to you. The way to use it is you literally just build up the phrases in whichever way you would like. So as an example, I could start from that reminds me, I believe your manager has gone to a new company. I heard this through the grapevine, is that, you know, what's happening with the team? Is there a new person starting as yet? And this can kind of start a conversation. So that's how this kind of framework works for small talk. Now, balancing general talk and then your own agenda. So we may have a purpose to our networking. You know, if we are job searching, if we are looking to build a professional network, particularly if we're new in the UK, you may have a particular objective that you have. Perhaps you're trying to meet specific people, you're looking for an introduction for somebody, or you may be more directly looking for a role with that person or even business with that person. So we have to know at what point is it appropriate for us to move off the general chit chat and then get down to our own conversations, so our own kind of agenda, our business agenda. So here are some thoughts about what would be the right way to approach this. So first of all, another quote, this time from Mark McCormack, who is the author of this book, What They Don't Teach You at Harvard Business School. And he was talking more about sales, but I think this is also applicable to networking and thinking about how the small talk works. So he said, all things being equal, people will buy from a friend. All things being not quite so equal, people will still buy from a friend. And the reason I've chosen this quote is that I think it applies to this situation because, again, it comes down to human connection. We want to be connected to somebody. If we want to help them, we want to do that because we genuinely feel like they are somebody we like, we trust, we believe in, and we've got to know them before we kind of get down to business. So I think that is kind of the principle that I would share with you here. So you know, just building on that, people resonate with people. You know, we should be really always listening very, very carefully as we have our conversations, rather than getting too fixated on our agenda, what we want from the conversation. And even if it's not obvious at first how you can do this, I'd highly recommend that you offer help first before you ask for something. So it may be that you know what you need to have from this person, but it is polite and it is also perhaps reciprocal. You may find that there are ways you can help this other person. And then finally, before you get into any sort of meeting like this, you should know what your key call to action is. So you should know, what is it you're really looking for? How could people in this networking event potentially help you? So what does that look like? So if you're offering help, you can ask these kinds of questions, such as, what's your biggest priority right now? Can I help you with any introductions to my network? Who are you looking to connect to, collaborate with right now? And you may be kind of surprised by some of those answers. You may find that there are ways that you can help this person. Obviously, offering the help first means that you can then feel also much more confident when you're kind of making your request as well. So your key call to action could be, I'm looking to connect with, and then be really, really specific. Who are the different kinds of people that you definitely want to connect with? I'm looking to collaborate with. It might be if you have a business, you're looking to build connections with people who can help you and support you in that way. So do have a plan and a think about this before you go into any meeting, but just make sure you're balancing the idea of getting to the person with your own agenda, and do start with offering your help first before you make your request. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. we're just coming towards the end, and then I'll just, I don't know if there's been any particular questions so far. I haven't seen anything pop up in the chat, but I'll give you a chance at the end to just ask any questions that you've got, or obviously join in the conversation and discussion. So ways to end or exit well. Okay, so it might be you've been in a one-to-one kind of person chat for a while, or perhaps you've been in a group and it's actually naturally the conversation is kind of coming to a close. So what is a really professional way to end the small talk? How can you do this in a way which is going to leave that very good last impression? So in positive conversations, when we want to end well, I would focus on not only thanking the person or saying, you know, that you've enjoyed talking to them. I would say that you need to really focus in on what you have particularly enjoyed talking to them about. So you can see here that I've highlighted each time in bold and italics the about part, because that's the really critical point. It's not just about you've enjoyed chatting to them. It's actually the fact that you've taken something out of that conversation. There's been value to you from that conversation. And particularly the first one, I think, is quite interesting. So perhaps you want to follow up, and that's obviously appropriate if you've built a good connection and you've had a good conversation. So, you know, don't be afraid at this point to suggest that. So say something like, you know, I have to leave soon, or I have to, we know we're about to go into the next event, but I'd love to know more about this project. Can we schedule a follow-up call? So, you know, that's absolutely appropriate to do, and would be a nice way to end the conversation if you were looking to meet them again. But if you don't want to follow up, that's absolutely fine as well. Not all conversations need that, but, you know, certainly focusing on, you know, what you've enjoyed about the conversation, what you've taken out of it. Now that's for, you know, your positive conversations. Clearly, there are times when actually, you know, no matter what you've tried, the connection just hasn't flowed, and you perhaps feel like the conversation isn't really kind of happening, and perhaps you're both standing there a little awkwardly thinking, okay, we probably want to end this conversation. So how do you exit out of conversation? Well, I think there are a number of excuses you can use. This is probably more for face-to-face networking. But if you have some challenges, then I would use perhaps one of these excuses. So I would go for either you need to get some food or water before the next talk, or potentially that you've seen somebody and you'd like to go over and say hello. You can even say that you need to pop to the toilet before the next session. And then the last one is quite interesting, but I think this does work. It's still polite, which is, you know, well, I'm glad we got the chance to connect. I don't want to dominate your time, so I'm just going to say hello to someone else, which is a really sort of polite way of saying, I'm going to leave you now and go and talk to somebody else now. So obviously this one is perhaps a little bit more direct, because it means that you then can go on and talk to somebody else. With these ones, you have to be conscious that obviously you probably need to find, you know, go away from the area for the time being, and perhaps find some food or water, or somebody else, a colleague or client. But hopefully those are helpful. And I'm sort of hopeful, obviously, you don't have those conversations too often where you feel like you need to exit out of them. But it is useful to be prepared, to know what you can say if you end up in that situation. How can you exit out? So I think that kind of brings us to a bit of a close. I'm conscious of we've got some time for questions as well, but just so you know, in terms of this talk, and I hope it has been useful to you in terms of like insights and tips and strategies. A couple of places in terms of where you can go for the next steps if you feel like you want to deepen your learning in this area, or around English communication confidence generally. So the first thing, which I'm kind of quite excited to share with you, I've developed a little quiz for you, just specifically for this group, which is an online interactive quiz, and it's called Are You a Networking Small Talk Pro in English? So you go through the questions, you get your score at the end, and you find out your networking small talk profile. So you can work out where you are at the moment. So you can see the link there. It's just a short link, bit.ly/quiz-series. small dash talk, so quiz small talk. But I'm sure I'm going to share this with Maria, and Maria will send this out as well. So that's the first thing. You can have a little go at the quiz and see how you're getting on at the moment, and see what I'm also going to share with you some tips about, depending on your level, kind of how you could improve. The other thing is, I'm always really happy to connect with people. If you'd like to connect, I'm Victoria Rennoldson. I don't think there are any other Victoria Rennoldsons out there. I have a long surname spelled in a funny way. So you're very, very welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn. And I share further resources and ideas and tips every day during the week. So you're very welcome to follow me there. And then finally, I send out a weekly email with even more free resources and strategies. So if that's something you'd like to receive, again, I'll put the link there, but I'll send that to Maria as well to circulate, if that's all right. So you can sign up and receive those. So that's kind of bring me to a bit of a natural close. I'm just going to pause there and also grab some water, I think. I've been talking for a rather long time. And just check in if there are any questions. I'm just going to see if I can see everybody as well. So any kind of questions or comments or any other sort of thoughts about small talk, confident small talk? Stunned silence. I've done too much talking already. Has anybody got any other sort of strategies or suggestions about things they've found have worked in the past for them in terms of small talk or networking?
Well, I think smiling is the best ever tool you need. I mean, as long as you keep smiling, everybody's going to react in a positive way.
Yeah, no, I completely see that. Yes, I completely agree with you there. I think people just they respond to the positive body language. That's as important as what you say. I completely agree, Gail. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree too. As long as you stay positive, the small talks are great. But if you want to talk negatively about something, that's tricky sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah. Lovely. Well,
sorry, it might be scary, especially if we are new to the country and maybe English is not our first language. So it can be, yeah, it used to be for me scary, worrying, and will I find the right word? Will I be up to speed with the conversation? Because sometimes you worry that your English is not good enough. But actually, again, I agree, smiling and acknowledging that sometimes you haven't understood completely what was said. Say, please say it again or something like that. It's really very welcome in a networking situation. So I think it's always important to think that we are all in the same boat. We might think that we are scared, but other people are at the same time equally. So it can be, sorry, my my computer went blank, but yeah, I think that's another thing to keep in consideration. And yeah, so it's not that bad. It's actually fun. It's actually fun networking because you discover so many things about other people, interesting people, sometimes boring people, but but it's also the curiosity that needs to lead you, I think, to
Yeah, I agree with you, Maria. I think that's a really good point. Like, I think it can be scary. And I think I'm very aware of this dynamic at the moment as well about some events going to in-person events. I think one of the questions I get sometimes asked is, what happens if I meet somebody and I can't understand their accent, their British accent, they're from somewhere like Scotland or somewhere that is a very particular strong accent I'm not used to. What should I do? Like, if I don't understand this person, that's really awkward. Well, I mean, I suppose what I would say is, you know, if you're in a situation where you're struggling to understand somebody, don't be afraid to just say, I'm really sorry, could you just repeat that? Or would you mind just speaking a little bit slower? That's absolutely fine. I mean, particularly networking, I think in London or in any of the big cities or any international kind of networks, people are very used to that idea and know that they may need to adapt how they speak. The other thing to do as a tip is try and just focus in on some keywords. So, you know, don't worry about understanding every single word that that person is saying. Just try and pick up maybe 1 or 2 words and ask back before you answer the question. Just kind of clarify and say, okay, so I think you were asking me about X, my job. Is that right? So you can just confirm that you understood the key points. And if not, it's no big problem. They'll clarify for you. But it's a really good point, Maria. I think that there's sometimes a fear factor there. But actually people are more open and aware sometimes that maybe their accent isn't easy to understand.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is that people love speaking about themselves. So as long as you ask questions, they will answer. And 99% of the people are nice people, and they just want to share things with you. And so the more interested you look, the better it's going to be for the small talk.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Lovely. So any sort of other final questions or comments at all? I can stop sharing, I think, just to make sure I can see everybody okay.
Hi, I'm Sonia. I just wanted
Sonia.
to add to what Maria said. Small talk sounds like a very easy thing to do, but it's not really. I mean, the important thing is to have the attitude and the confidence to want to do it, but everybody has different personalities, right? So I can say myself, I get nervous when I have to go to an event and I don't know people. And also the language barrier is, the language is also a barrier, and the accent. And I must say that when I'm speaking and I see that people is struggling to understand what I'm saying because of my accent, then I get kind of nervous, and then I start like panicking, and then I don't know what else to say. So you see, so I think it's an important thing to work in everybody's one's confidence and have the attitude to want to do it. You know, and that is not something easy, I must say.
Absolutely. I think it's kind of going back to, you know, I was talking about the Dr. Pepper moment. You know, what's the worst that can happen? Usually it's that you don't find you have a good connection with somebody. Normally that fear of not being understood, actually people normally, you know, would kind of try very, very hard to understand. And if they kind of found it difficult, they would just perhaps ask you to slow down in terms of talking, would be the only way. But I agree with you. I think confidence is a really big part of this. Kind of going, actually, I'm just going to have a go. Even if I don't know anybody at this event, I'm going to do this because there is a benefit to building up my small talk confidence in English, but also potentially a really big benefit to my network, to my networking skills, to my career, and so on.
Yeah, and of course, there is always a benefit of doing that. You happen to know other people for whatever reason, and it's good. I think it's good. I think it's a good thing.
Thank you for sharing, Sonia. I really appreciate that.
Great. Do we have any more questions for Victoria? No? Any more experiences to share? Well, if you want to try it out, we have next Wednesday our first Thirsty Wednesday, which Thirsty Tuesday, is it? No, Wednesday. I don't remember.
It's Wednesday. It's Wednesday.
Sorry.
Wednesday the 29th.
It's a meetup with Focus member in Shoreditch in a very, very cool place. And so if you want to come and have a drink with us, we can actually try it out, the small talk thing, because everybody's, I mean, no one will know anyone. So it's all about small talks. So you're more than welcome if you want to register. It's on the website, on the Focus website, and we'd love to see you there and try Victoria's tips. So thank you. So if you don't have anything to add, maybe we'll finish the session if you don't mind. So I'll stop the recording.